You've tuned into Heroes Wanted. I am your host, Joe Prim. In this episode, I'm going to get into some of my favorite books that I listened to over 2021. I was asked a while back by a friend to share some of my favorite books because he knows that I listen to and read a lot of books each year. Rather than go back through the last 5, 6, or 7 years and break down my favorites of all time, for this episode, I just wanted to go back over 2021 and share. I'm not sure which of these books would end up on my very favorites list, but I think that each and every one of these books is worthwhile for its own reason. I tried to spread it out for several different categories, from nonfiction to fiction to self-help or growth books. So I think there should be something here for everybody. I'm going to give you the title of the book. I want to share the publisher's notes on the book, and then I'll share some of my thoughts. I don't want this podcast to drag on because all I'm doing is reading about books, and some of them may not pertain to you at all, or maybe books that you've listened to or read already. But in doing that, in making an effort to go through these books quickly, I may miss some ideas or some thoughts. Maybe you have some commentary, maybe you have some ideas on a book, or maybe you have a few questions and aren't sure if you want to add it to your Audible library at this point. You can always reach out to me on Instagram or on Facebook, or send me an email at joeprim@heroeswanted.us. The purpose of this podcast is to help fathers abandon their average life. You get stuck in going through the motions and trying to figure out what happens next and where to go. The purpose here is to help you abandon that and uncover the hero within. If you think this podcast is of value to you, if it's something you listen to regularly and know somebody that you think would enjoy this podcast, I would appreciate it if you would share it with them. Leave a review, subscribe to the podcast. Let's keep the momentum moving forward with Heroes Wanted. So at this point, I believe we have over 450 books in our Audible library. That's not just me. Those aren't just all my books. Some of them are my kids' books and stories that they listen to over and over again. In fact, that may be an option too at some point, to share some of the stories that books that they like and that they listen to over and over again. But a lot of those books are mine. The majority of those books I have read or are part of a series where I've listened to at least part of that series. So these are my favorite books from 2021. There's no special order here to these books. So we're going to start with No More Mr. Nice Guy. This is a book written by Dr. Robert Glover. It came out in 2017. And I'm going to read through the notes on this book. The notes on this book are a lot longer than the other books, but I think it does a very good job of breaking down what this book is about and why this book may be just what you need. It says, a nice guy, according to Dr. Robert Glover, a pioneering expert in the nice guy syndrome, is a man who believes he is not okay just as he is. He is convinced that he must become what he thinks others want him to be liked, loved, and to get his needs met. He also believes that he must hide everything about himself that might trigger a negative response in others. The nice guy syndrome typically begins in infancy and childhood, when a young boy inaccurately internalizes emotional messages about himself and the world. It is fueled by toxic shame and anxiety. Rapid social change in the late 20th century and early 21st century has contributed to a worldwide explosion of men struggling to find happiness, love, and purpose. The paradigm of the Mr. Nice Guy syndrome is driven by three faulty covert contracts. Nice guys believe, if I am good, then I will be liked and loved. If I meet other people's needs without having them ask, then they will meet my needs without having me ask. If I do everything right, then I will have a smooth and problem-free life. The inauthentic and chameleon-like approach to life causes nice guys to often feel frustrated, confused, and resentful. Subsequently, these men are often anything but nice. Common nice guy patterns include giving to get, difficulty setting boundaries, dishonesty, caretaking, fixing, codependency, people-pleasing, conflict avoidance, passive-aggressiveness, unsatisfying relationships. Since the publication of No More Mr. Nice Guy in 2003, hundreds of thousands of men worldwide have learned how to release toxic shame, soothe their anxiety, face their fears, connect with men, embrace their passion and purpose, and experience success in work and career. These guys also learn to set boundaries, handle conflict, make their needs a priority, and develop satisfying relationships. The process of recovery from nice guy syndrome allows men to move through depression, social anxiety and shyness, codependency, low self-esteem, loneliness, hopelessness, feelings of failure, lack of confidence and purpose, compulsive behaviors and addictions, feeling stuck in life. Contrary to what the title may seem to imply, No More Mr. Nice Guy does not teach men how to be not nice. Dr. Glover shows men how to become what he calls integrated males. Becoming integrated does not mean becoming different or better. It means that you are able to accept all aspects of oneself. An integrated male can embrace everything that makes him unique, his power, assertiveness, his humor, his courage, and his mission, as well as his fears, his imperfections, his mistakes, his rough edges, and his dark side. So that's the publisher's words on this book. For me, this is something that I have definitely been working through over the last 5 years. If I had read this book or listened to this book earlier, it would have been much more helpful to me than it was this past year. But it is definitely a book that I took some great points away from. It caused me to think. It caused me to realize what some of the issues were in the past, some of them that I had worked through and some of them that I'm still working through. It was a good book. It's definitely a book that I recommend probably almost to anybody. At this point, the way that things are in this country, you see so many men struggling with this ideal of being the nice guy. And the idea really that gets taken on in that book is that nice guys finish last. And that's a saying that I've heard since I was a kid, and a saying that I've known guys that were good guys that would say, well, I'm just bound and determined to prove that saying wrong. But the reality is how we go about being nice, and being nice becomes a weakness and becomes a crutch in your life. And this book does a great job of breaking down different causes and different consequences for the different ways that we behave. Does a great job breaking it down, does a great job of correcting it. I would really recommend this book to anybody who thinks that they're a nice guy or thinks that nice guys finish last and doesn't quite understand why. Book number 2 is Unbreakable, a Navy SEAL's Way of Life, and this is by Thom Shea. I've listened to my fair share of books from the war in Afghanistan and in Vietnam and in Iraq, and listened to my fair share of books that are written by Navy SEALs. Seems like that's kind of what they do after they retire from the Navy, is write books, and most of them have been very good. This book stuck with me because it is a little bit different. This book was never intended to become published into a book. This was a diary that he wrote for his young children, that they would be able to understand who he was, what he believed in, why he did what he did, why he was spending so much time outside of the United States as they were growing up, so that should something happen to him, they would have something to remember him by, that they would have something personal to understand who their father was, why he was the way he was and to have a better understanding of him. So it was a very different point of view than so many of these other books that are written are just either on leadership or just kind of a straight facts about what was going on during different missions. This had a different tone to it, a different look to it as it talked about the relationship between Thom, Shea, and his wife and the different things that were being written. But there's one thing that particularly stuck with me in this book, and I think that it is a good thing to understand and a good thing to grasp onto and hold onto for all of us. And that's something that his wife told him before he left to go to, I believe it was Afghanistan. And she said, "Don't fear death. It makes you weak. We need you to fight back to us." And that phrase is mentioned over and over again in this book, and how it pushed Thom forward, how it kept his momentum in times of stress and times of difficulty, that those words echoed in his mind of "don't fear death, it makes you weak. We need you to fight back to us." And that idea, that premise, that stop expecting things to be easy. Stop expecting that if you stay on the outside, if you stay safe, if you stay on the periphery, that then you will get back. That fearing death makes you weak. It is the obstacle. It is what you need to face in order to get back to your family, in order to get back home. And now I know I gave my thoughts on this book before I read the notes on Audible. I'll jump into those now. It says, a highly decorated Navy SEAL shares his years of combat experience in Afghanistan, providing leadership insights that will shift your view of oneself and provoke life-altering change. Before leaving for combat in Afghanistan, Navy SEAL Thom Shea promised his wife that he would write his children in case he didn't make it back. What was initially intended to be a private memoir for his family turned into a powerful set of lessons for anyone striving to perform beyond what they believe possible. Shea's stories, while action-packed and entertaining, provide incredible insights on leadership, family, and excellence. Again, one of my favorite books from this last year. Actually, Thom talks in this book about going for a 24-hour walk, and that he challenged himself for that. And out of that is where the Strength Through Adversity walk that I did this past year in 2021 and will be doing again in early March here in Texas, the Strength Through Adversity walk. If you are interested, hit me up and I will get you the details. But again, highly recommend Unbreakable by Thom Shea. Number 3 on the list, Violence of Mind, Training and Preparation for Extreme Violence by Varg Freeborn. It's a book covering the topic of self-defense from shocking first-hand perspective. The subject of criminal violence, self-defense, lethal force, mindset, firearms training, and concealment have never been introduced so comprehensively in one place, having successfully sold worldwide in its independently published and distributed paperback and Kindle formats. Varg Freeborn is an author, strength and fitness coach, violence educator, and lethal force instructor. Very different from books I have read in the past. It is written from the point of view of somebody that lived out extreme violence and was in the prison system for a long time, clearly understands the criminal mindset, and it's very difficult for most of us to comprehend or even really get a grasp on the minds of those that are violent criminals. It's just something that we don't deal with on a daily basis. It's something that we are not around. And because you're not around it regularly, it's hard to understand how dark and evil these predators truly are. And if you don't understand how dark and evil other men can be, it makes it very difficult to understand how you need to respond in such situations. This book does a great job of breaking down what true violence really is, what it looks like, and those that perpetuate that type of violence, how they live. And he breaks down some thoughts and ideas on this stuff that I think are very wise and taken from a completely different vantage point than most of the people that are doing training and most of the people that are teaching about violence are coming from. He's coming from a different direction, and I really appreciated it. Again, this was one of my top books of 2021. Now we'll pop into my favorite nonfiction book of 2021, and it's a book called Rogue Heroes, A History of the SAS, Britain's secret special forces unit that sabotaged the Nazis and changed the nature of war. Britain's Special Air Service, or SAS, was the brainchild of David Sterling, a young aristocrat whose aimlessness in early life belied a remarkable strategic mind. Where most of his colleagues looked at a battle map of World War II's African theater and saw a protracted struggle with Rommel's desert forces, Sterling saw an opportunity. Given a small number of elite, well-trained men, he could parachute behind enemy lines and sabotage their airplanes and war material. Prepared with his constituent opposite, the disciplined Jock Lewis, Sterling assembled a revolutionary fighting force that would upend not just the balance of the war, but the nature of combat itself. He faced no little resistance from those who found his tactics ungentlemanly or beyond the pale. But in the SAS remarkable exploits facing the Nazis in Africa, then on the continent can be found the seeds of nearly all special forces units that would follow. Bringing his keen eye for psychological detail to a riveting wartime narrative, Ben Macintyre uses his unprecedented access to SAS archives to shine a light inside a legendary unit long shrouded in secrecy. The result is not only a tremendous war story, but a fascinating group portrait of men of whom history and country ask the most. Again, I read a lot of books about war and those who fought in those wars. This book was different, being as it was World War II, but even more so, most of the books that we read or movies that we watch are World War II in the European theater, where this took place in Africa. And Africa was much, much different than what was going on in Europe. It was, at the time, very much different because it was seen as like a gentlemanly war. There was, so when the SAS got involved and they started doing their sneak tactics, it was frowned upon, even by the Britons, or the British. So, a great book, very interesting the amount of leeway that these SAS were given at the time, the different ideas, their different tactics, the different things that they were getting away with, and the different things that they were doing. It is a great story. Very interesting story, too, because you just see how differently these men during that generation were built, how they carried themselves, the things that they did, the risks that they were willing to take. It is so much different mindset and different way of looking at things than our safety first culture and society that we live in today. These guys let it all hang out in the middle of the African deserts, and it is a fun, exciting book to read. And even more so knowing full well that these were real people that were facing incredible odds at so many different times because of their small units and going behind enemy lines and stealing vehicles from the Nazis and using their vehicles so that they could get even deeper behind enemy lines. Some really great stories in there. If you like history at all, if you're interested in the origins of different special forces, I would highly recommend this book. So from the health category, this is a book that I've mentioned in some other podcasts. It's called The Energy Paradox: What to Do When Your Get Up and Go Has Got Up and Gone. And it's written by Dr. Stephen R. Gundry. Dr. Gundry explains, feeling tired, moody, and zapped of energy is not normal, no matter your workload or age. Fatigue is an SOS flare from your body, one that is intended to alert us that something is wrong. In his critical work, Dr. Gundry has found that his patients who complain of feeling sick and tired all the time almost always have something in common: the inflammation markers of a leaky gut. The reality is, this book was a tough listen because he very much in the first chapters gets into the science of what's going on in your body, your gut, your microbiome, your mitochondrial health, and it's difficult sometimes to follow along. But at the point that I was listening to this book, I was suffering with so much fatigue, and I was having such a difficulty just doing what I normally wanted to do, let alone what I really wanted to do. So this book, in the end, was a big help to me. It helped me change my diet. Towards the end, he gets into more of day-to-day action steps that you can take, from changing your diet to changing different activities in the evenings and night before you go to bed so you can get better nights of sleep. So I highly recommend this book. Like I said, it's parts of it are a rough read just because it does lay out the science behind everything. But in the end, I'm grateful that I read it. It has made a major improvement for me in getting over my fatigue that I was experiencing. At the point where I was reading this book, I was needing to take a nap every day when I would get home from work. I was having 3 or 4 coffees every morning and a energy drink every afternoon on my way home from work. It was a very rough time for me. So I found this book right at the right time. It helped fill a void that I had of understanding of what was wrong and how to remedy that. So if you're struggling with your energy levels, this might be what you need. Again, that's The Energy Paradox by Stephen R. Gundry. Now, I don't only listen to nonfiction and to books on growth or self-help books. Once in a while, I'll take a step away from that, need to refresh my mind and just enjoy listening to something. And I found a book this last year. It was actually included on Audible, so it was free. It's called Genesis Arisen, book 0.5 by Michael Stephen Fuchs. And it is a zombie book. No doubt about it. That's what it is. It ended up being the perfect escape that I needed at the right time. It is well written. The audiobook is perfect to just have an escape and delve into this other world. When I do listen to books like this, it is imperative to me that there is some sort of reality to it where I can listen to this book of something that's purely fictional, but I can find some realism there. In the way this book was written, there were no crazy superheroes. People that step up, that are good at what they do, still die in this book. It is really well written. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I just enjoyed it so much because of the time that I listened to it, or if it was as good as I believe that it was at this point. But it's at the very beginning of what's happening during I guess the start of a zombie apocalypse, right? I don't know how better to say it. But at the very, very cusp of what's going on in a remote area in Africa where these Americans find themselves. It is, again, really well written. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll probably listen to a couple more books in this series later this year, just because it was such a good escape from what I normally listen to, the seriousness of it. It was very enjoyable. Like I said, this one, if you have Audible, this one's included for free. It's a 6-hour listen for free, and I really enjoyed it. Again, it's called Genesis Arisen, Book Point 5 by Michael Stephen Fuchs. The last and final kind of bonus book that I wanted to share here is a book actually that I just read today with my family. It's a book that I had been recommended to me, so I purchased it. In this book, I would not recommend you get the audio version of it. This book, I would totally recommend that you get the hardback version of it. It's a very short book. It's only, here I'm looking at the description on Audible, it's only 58 minutes. But what you miss out on by getting the audio version versus the hardcover version is the beautiful artwork that goes along with this story. The name of the book is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, written by Charlie Mackesy. We really enjoyed this book. It's a book that you can read in one sitting, but the artwork will make it a book that your kids return to time after time. It says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" asked the mole. "Kind," said the boy. Charlie Mackesy offers inspiration and hope in uncertain times in this beautiful audiobook, following the tale of a curious boy, a greedy mole, a wary fox, and a wise horse who find themselves together in somewhat difficult terrain, sharing their greatest fears and biggest discoveries about vulnerability, kindness, hope, friendship, and love. The shared adventures and important conversations between the four friends are full of life lessons that have connected with audiences of all ages. Again, a very beautiful artwork book to share with your family. Great story, great points. It was funny, as I was reading this today, there was a couple of different sayings in the book. One was about comparing yourself to other people, and I can't remember offhand what the other one was. But on both of these topics, my son said to me, why is this book talking about things that we've been talking about lately? I said, well, because that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is something that's shared, and you hear it here, and then you hear it again over here, and you hear it someplace else, because those are wise words. So I highly recommend this book. If you're looking for something to read to your kids, again, it's probably a 1 hour read between you and your kids, but it seems to me a book that will last and get passed around in our family for a long time. The beautiful artwork, again, some beautiful quotes, some great quotes, some encouraging quotes in that book to understand life and understand the difficulties of life, and to keep moving forward as you follow along with this kind of unlikely pair of friends. A lot of you out there listening are feeling lost, are stuck where you're at, and not certain how to get from where you are today to where you want to be. What I'd like to do is offer a strategy call to analyze where you're at, where you want to go, and how we can get you to go from point A to point B. If that sounds interesting to you, if you'd like to play that out and we can work together to come up with a game plan to help get you unstuck, to help get you back moving in the direction that you want to go in, email me, Joe Prim at heroeswanted.us. Put coach in the subject line, and we'll set up a conversation between you and me, and we'll get you headed back in the right direction. As always, men, hold fast, and God bless.